Imagine, if you will, being crouched in the trenches of the Second World War. The drumming of artillery all around you distorts your field of vision. As your senses betray you, what you can't get to glimpse is a carnage taking place in front of you. What you can smell is the dreadful aroma of death and humidity, and gunpowder. Your hands shake uncontrollably as you do your utmost to strengthen yourself for the upcoming scramble. Your captain screams a command, and you rise, as powerful as a soldier, but as terrified as a young man. Too aware of his flaws to believe himself to be the lucky hero that will bring Germany to its knees. But that night you do survive. You lose some friends, and you're plagued by a ringing in your ear that doctors aren't sure will heal up in the damp conditions of this northern French city where you're stationed. That night, you lie in bed thinking of home and wondering why you even enlisted. Is it worth all this bloodshed to put an end to the delirium of a single man with a funny mustache? However exhausting the day has been, sleep does not take you, and you find yourself wandering the room that you used to share with one of your fallen soldiers. Among the forever empty bunk bed that used to be occupied by one of them, you find a comic book. There is a man in a spangly outfit, carving his way through a small army of German soldiers. He calls himself Captain America, and his story is legend. A young boy from Brooklyn, orphaned a few years before the war, he stands for the true perfect soldier, a role you struggle and fail to reach every day. But the next morning, when the orchestral piece that is the German artillery begins anew, you find your pulse slightly less shaky. You might not be the greatest super soldier that will spearhead the Allied liberation of Europe, but you are a good man, ready to do what is right, today, and, God willing, tomorrow. Welcome to Rebel Culture, where today we will talk about why I believe Steve Rogers to be a fantastic superhero. If you feel you are enjoying our content, hit the like button and consider subscribing to this channel. But for now, let me explain to you why I love Captain America. Listen, I understand the Captain America haters. Their arguments saying that he is a relic of another time are correct, and their belief that he has never been able to work outside World War II period is understandable. But I believe that Captain America doesn't just work despite those reasons, but because of them. Let me explain. For a while, I have been feeling that our modern fixation with villains turning into heroes is not merely a sign of a more educated audience requiring complex dramatic figures, but also an indication of a society slightly afraid to point out and call out the good and the bad of our world. Steve Rogers is very much a man of the past, a member of the greatest generation, who had barely experienced the globalization that would follow the second part of the 20th century. A soldier who stood firm against the clear evils of fascism and never had to ponder the virtues and defects of the status quo of the West. I believe that Cap was frozen in ice at the perfect point in time where the world began getting tremendously complex. The rise of the communist bloc and the atrocities of the Stalin regime never had to be pondered by the soldier who only a couple of years before had belonged to an alliance with the Russian superpower. Also, Captain America, at least the one we see in the MCU, never had to face down the corrupt actions of the government whose flag adorns his uniform. The MCU's Steve Rogers never had to see the downfall of Nixon, the influence of the US in South America, or the Red Scare that swept through the States. Captain America could afford a black and white morality. We, sadly, cannot. So we're then bound to be critical of what we see as a simplistic flaw in this character's personality. And to a certain degree, I can understand this belief. In a way, it is much easier to lead the Wehrmacht to ruin than it would have been to untangle the compromised operations that sought to murder Castro or Allende. But it is also important to point out that perhaps it is that simplistic moral compass that would have been necessary in those days. Perhaps if Steve Rogers would have taken an active role in the second part of the 20th century, he would have helped the Vietnamese people caught in the crossfire of the war and opposed the CIA-sanctioned coups across South America. I think it is not a crazy assumption to make, since during the MCU, Cap is presented with situations that test his moral compass in moments very much in line with the complex moral world we face, and still remains the good man he swore Dr. Erskine he would be. Steve actively goes against his own government, against S.H.I.E.L.D. and against the Avengers when he considers them to be on the wrong side of a given action. He condemns and brings to ruin Project Insight, stands in opposition to the Sokovia Accords, which leads to the Avengers Civil War, and remains on the run from his government until the arrival of Thanos' minions force him out of hiding, only to fight again to protect the universe. Every time I hear someone pointing out Steve's moral compass as a weakness, there is a part of me that thinks that perhaps if we were all brave enough to call out wrongful acts as such, we might generate the kind of society that stops being comfortable with being constantly morally compromised. I want to point out the greatest advice given to Steve Rogers by Dr. Erskine that night before the injection of the serum. It is one of the most misunderstood lines in the MCU, I believe. Erskine says that the serum amplifies everything that is inside. Good becomes great, but bad becomes worse. Some people understand this line at face value and criticize the fact that the serum is capable of making moral judgments on the person it is inserted into. This is not what I understand that line to mean. I believe Erskine speaks here of the nature of power and its ability to corrupt men who seek it without being morally sound. The first Captain America movie establishes a parallelism between Johann Schmidt, the Red Skull, and Steve. And Erskine's line echoes this parallel. Schmidt became further corrupted by the serum. Not because the serum judged him to be evil, but because power in the hands of a morally compromised person will always lead to tragedy. That is why Erskine's desire is for Cap to remain the same after the serum as he is before it. Not a perfect soldier, but a good man. I love that line, and it might as well be written as the source code of Captain America moving forward, because it has so many meanings and Steve lives up to all of them. Firstly, it establishes the notion that being a good man is more important than excellence, even at a moment in time when some evil might have been justifiable as the Allies fought their way towards Berlin. Secondly, it subtly introduces the notion that in the future Cap will be forced to choose against following orders, aka being a perfect soldier, and the stand for virtues that he holds dear, aka being a good man. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, consider subscribing to Rebel Culture. We're a new channel and each one of you truly helps, so thank you. And now, let's continue with the video. Cap's decisions are never, not once, made out of blind patriotism or regimented military discipline. They are always weighted under the scales of his own conscience. In The Winter Soldier, Fury argues that Project Insight might bring peace to their time, but Cap argues that holding a gun to everyone on Earth and calling it protection is not a good philosophy. He is made to defend security over liberty by his government, and he chooses not to. A similar thing happens with the Sokovia Accords. Once again, Cap is presented with the dilemma of being a perfect soldier, in this case exemplified by giving away the right to choose where the Avengers intervene, and instead refuses to do so. The reason he does this echoes once again to that Erskine line. At that point in time, after the collapse of S.H.I.E.L.D., the revelation of Hydra's parasite, and the conflict with Ultron, Cap has developed a tremendous skepticism towards the government in general, and also towards Stark. Cap is morally uncompromisable, even when faced with the moral dilemmas of our present, and made to grapple with both the meaning of his legacy as Captain America, as inherently entrenched with the American political system, and his own agency and morals as a good man. I will leave you with one final thought. In his final battle against the Red Skull atop the Valkyrie, Schmidt tries to convince Steve to join him in unveiling the power of the Tesseract, as they have both left humanity behind and become the superior men. Schmidt says that it is their right to use the power of the gods to bring the rest of humanity to heel. Steve refuses and collapses the Valkyrie in the ice. But many, many years later, he is literally proven to be worthy of the power of the gods, as he manages to lift Thor's hammer in the battle against Thanos. So in a way, Steve proved himself to be the superior man, but not by being the most powerful or a good soldier to be moved around the world by compromised third parties, but by being and remaining a good man. So thank you for watching Rebel Culture, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you in the next one.